So let me be clear and make this statement that I support banning biosolid applications for biosolids that test positive for high levels of PFAS. And all the farmers in Johnson County and abroad support that decision to prevent their farmlands from being contaminated. I think from the beginning there was a causation established and not a lot of research done to fully investigate the potential for any other causation. I feel county commissioner is the best way to use my skills and knowledge applicably to the elected position. Forward thinking is essential and budgeting not only for what is ahead of you, but to prepare for what is unknown. So, there's multiple causations of PFAS that we have to start to look at and start to mitigate now and make sure if we do need to change laws, if we do need to put in legislation and regulation, they can't just be in biosolids. People come to a understanding, well, this is just how it is. And that is one of the most disheartening ideas that's out there in culture. It's not what is. Your road being not to the standard you would like for it to be, that's just how it is. That shouldn't be your perspective. The culture that we start to tell the taxpayers what we're going to do and when we're going to do it. Without doing that, we can't be held accountable as a elected official. I'm not here to say, well, we don't have very much money or the budget doesn't allow for that. I bring a different perspective of, well, let's see exactly how we can address that and get creative with solutions. Opening up the decision making to the taxpayers and letting them be involved in some of these decisions. Absolutely. Right? I think that, your prioritization comes into play and what your commissioner is prioritizing. So if that's road, then his relations with TxDOT will reflect that. But I can't stress enough the conservative mindset that we have to start bringing. If we're going to start to eliminate property tax or if we're going to try to move into a decrease of government, we have to be able to reduce the taxes at some point. Detailed out and try to be as proactive as you can so everybody stays on a plan and stays accountable to what they're expected to do, and you can stay on a timeline and a projection that ultimately leads to a good project and a finished project that me and the client is happy with. So in this situation, it would be the taxpayers. We're patching the edge of the road at least 18 inches inside of where the original road started. So we've basically started to forfeit road on the edges to try to repair it. So taxpayers. So we should be transparent with what we're going to do from the county level and from both from the road construction to the budget transparency, so that everybody's on the same page. That so your police, your fire, even your jails, those are all essential parts of the community. PFAS is an issue, and it is affecting families and farms in a variety of ways are dealing with, and one is the condition of the roads. They've been degraded, that we're losing shoulders, so they're getting more narrow all the time. And then just the efficiency of repair doesn't seem to be really being attributed very well. Test that was done on the farm where the biosolids were actually applied, it did not test for elevated rates of PFAS that would indicate significant harm. Taxpayer dollars aren't being used adequately or stretched as far as they can. So that's the kind of mentality I hope to bring, and without that transparency, we can't have accountability, and that's what we really need to bring is a fresh perspective to use technology in our implementations for both PFAS, forward thinking, roads, budgetaries, analysis, the entire spectrum. We can grow and become more efficient and be more transparent. Let's see if we can address these issues and start creating solutions, even if they are long-term. Let's create a long-term solution so that you can hold me accountable to that. So the farm in question never had biosolids applied to it. It's challenging to establish definitive causation, and I think we may have got emotional with the situation and potentially issued a causation that may or may not have been identifiable at the time for sure. And then after we look at some studies that have done previously to that, it definitely puts that into question. We have to look at a PFAS problem as a PFAS problem, not a PFAS problem and attach it directly to biosolids. We have to focus PFAS on all causation for PFAS and remediate that so we protect our planet, we protect our children, and we protect the future of Johnson County. Be more effective with the resources we have, to be more efficient. That way in 4 years from now when we're doing this again, I can say, well, I was held to the the accountable standard that I put forward to the taxpayers. Somebody that's there leading the road crew, that's available in the office to oversee the budgets, the projects, and the people of Johnson County. I don't want to hear what we can't. I want to provide solutions for what we can do to move forward. Are we accountable right now? Can we be held accountable with the transparency we provided to the taxpayers? And if you can't answer that, then it's time for a change, and that's what I represent.
Voting season is upon us. And what better way to exercise your right to vote than by casting your vote for APOS floors and granite countertops to help you update your home? APOS offers design, fabrication, and installation of granite countertops, floors, and more for both residential and commercial projects. APOS is where customer service and commitment to the community come together. Vote today for APOS floors to install your new floor and granite countertops.
Welcome to the Texas Transparency Project, where transparency perpetuates accountability. Our mission is to help people judge candidates, ballot issues, and public problems fairly. We focus on how a person will use power, how their choices will affect your daily life, and whether they can be trusted to use that power responsibly. Transparency means the public can see how leaders use power. Accountability happens when voters use what they see to make smart choices at the ballot box. Public office should not be earned just because someone is famous, popular, or well-connected, because popularity is not the same as ability. If we do not judge leaders carefully, we can end up with selfish or harmful leadership. The Texas Transparency Project does not tell you who to vote for. We give you the tools to decide who should represent our communities and how to hold them accountable once they're in office. Today, we're going to be discussing Johnson County Commissioner Precinct 4, and our guest is Jake Petty. Jake Petty is a lifelong Johnson County resident and candidate for County Commissioner Precinct 4. Jake is a small business owner, husband, and father who was led to run through prayer and a strong desire to serve his community. Jake's campaign is rooted in faith, personal responsibility, and a hands-on approach to local government, road repair, and long-term maintenance are Jake's top two priorities. Jake also believes in using practical technology and data to make smarter decisions, stretch taxpayer dollars farther, and improve how we maintain our county roads. Jake is excited to make his inaugural appearance here on the Texas Transparency Project, but is even more excited to share his vision and plan for the citizens of Johnson County Precinct 4. Mr. Petty, welcome to the Texas Transparency Project. You're knee-deep in the middle of this campaign. We're a week away from early voting. During this campaign, and since you decided to run, how have things been going? And how's the campaign going? And are you getting enough sleep and stress-free enough?
We've definitely decreased a little bit of sleep over the last few weeks, but it's been a very educational experience, meeting with some of the community and some of the residents of Johnson County, especially in Precinct 4. Notably, the amount of roads and distance that we cover in the precinct, and some of the issues that the voice has been voiced to me from the community has been enlightening. I've been able to gather some relationships that I think will have lasting benefits, and allow me to serve the community in a lot of different functions. So educational, and also bringing a sense of community to some of the rural areas, which is exciting for me. So it's been a fun experience, a stressful experience at times, and we're looking forward to continuing the campaign to the finish, and hopefully be successful in this endeavor.
Well, thanks for joining us again. We really appreciate it. And we always start our candidate interviews off with the 3 W's. And the first one is Jake Petty. Who is Jake Petty in your own words?
So I'm a lifelong resident, Johnson County, as you said, and more than that, a generational resident. I've been here for quite some time. I've done some studies in some other country, in some other states, and even abroad. But I've resided here in Johnson County for the majority of my life. And my mom's a teacher here for 30 years. She's retired and still, full-time substitute. So I raised my children here. I have a son; he's 8, and we're teaching him a little bit about how government works now and how local county governance works. And so that's been educational. I've spent a little bit of time in a variety of fields, but always in a leadership position from the beginning. And so I'm a faith-based, highly Christian uh, gentleman who serves his community. I'm well known throughout the majority of churches, and I'm from Alvarado, specifically in Johnson County. And you can go there and you can find me in a variety of servant roles and mentalities. So that's where my really who I am is who I am in faith. So I can't really I've crucified a lot of that flesh through my faith, and so I represent Christ mostly in my life and in my business and in my future endeavors.
Well, Precinct 4 commissioner, very few people aim so high to begin with their political careers. Why did you decide to run for Johnson County Precinct 4 commissioner? There's a lot of other ways to serve, and that's biting off that's taking a big bite real quick. What made you decide to do that, and why are you running for that precinct specifically?
So my recent history and past history has prepared me in a fiscal budgeting preparation and training, as well as my history in industrial instruction, construction, and development allows me to apply my current skills and knowledge to the political position or the governance. And so for me, that though there are multiple ways to get involved in governance, I feel county commissioner is the best way to use my skills and knowledge applicably to the elected position. So
And the last one is everybody and you have an advantage when you're not the incumbent. You have an advantage of making everybody happy with with what you may say, so to speak. As you're asking for people's votes, you're going to be, and if elected, you're going to be asked to make a lot of different decisions that affect a lot of different people's lives. um, what can the voters, if they so choose to elect you, what can they be confident in that will be your guiding light, your true north? What will you lean on to make the decisions if you're elected county commissioner?
So you have to, maintain relations with your constituents, right? The taxpayers. You should be available to them, every day. You should be available in some regard, and more especially in the office and in precinct 4. You have to stay accountable. You have to stay present to oversee your duties and responsibilities on the day-to-day operations, but more especially to the constituents of precinct 4. So hearing their voice and then following through, even if the answer may not be what they're expecting to hear or what they would like to hear. There's two ways to go about that. You can, open-ended the question and not give answers, or you can avoid the question. But I try to plan to be as forward-thinking as I can, and so that I give an answer to their question on a projection. If you've got an issue with your road, I should be able to not just say when it allows or when the finances allow. My plan is to bring this is where you're at in future planning. I think through technology and data and forward thinking, we should be able to have a projection that encompasses all roads. And so beyond that, any other specific questions, you should be able to develop an answer for that. So be accountable, be available for them to come to the barn, or for me to meet them on their turf and see what their issues are, and then to provide adequate answers, even if it's but to be definitive and not open-ended. So that's my promise to the people of Johnson County, to provide those availabilities and those answers.
And you talked a little bit about your background and qualifications, but specifically, what in your life makes you qualified to take on the role of county commissioner? What experiences have you had that help set you up for success if you are elected and you get through the general election in November? We got to remember
Right.
there's still a little bit more after this, but potentially. But if you do get elected, what part of your background, what part of your qualifications will lead you to be the best commissioner for Precinct 4?
So, I started my early career in the workforce and taking college classes and in the medical field. So I started as a technician level in the medicine and healthcare. Kind of spent time there while working and going to school, and rose through the ranks of the healthcare field and ended up in a administrative consulting role before transferring into construction. What that has taught me was, a significant amount about fiscal conservatism, budgeting, regulatory compliance. There's obviously a significant amount of compliance needed in the healthcare field. So I was in charge of policy and procedure manuals, handbooks, Joint Commission audits, HIPAA practices. Making sure my staff had supplies and were prepared, had the training needed necessary to provide adequate services. And you learn a lot, but by going through the process from the bottom to ensure that, as a management aspect of it, your technician level is fully prepared for the job they're doing, and that's a big perspective that you gain by rising through the ranks. Um, I was ended up consulting for several facilities in the local area at Hughley and surrounding areas, and was able to be successful in that. What ultimately led me out of that was the desire to provide more for the technician level. So I left the upper level management after the Obamacare changes came to healthcare. It kind of didn't allow for upper level management to facilitate those kinds of administrative positions. And so we yielded to that to supplement the technician level. I then took those skills into what I was raised on, which is construction and development. My dad was a builder. And so I took some of those skills to the management side of construction. And those years I've been there for about 10, I guess 13 years now. 2013 we started, and I've been blessed with success in that field. Rose up to all the way to some industrial projects that also require some regulatory compliance. But what it started to teach me was how to forward think. When you're dealing with a large scale project with multifacets of construction, forward thinking is essential, and budgeting, not only for what is ahead of you, but to prepare for what is unknown. That's something that's different about construction. So you have to be able to adapt to situations that are kind of developing, because Mother Nature doesn't give you her plan. And so you have to be able to be fluid thinking and adapt to the current situations and prioritize assets, right? So asset allocation and being able to prioritize uh, the needs of the project or the community, and then facilitating that. But really, the forward thinking of really detailed out and try to be as proactive as you can, so everybody stays on a plan and stays accountable to what they're expected to do, and you can stay on a timeline and a projection that ultimately leads to a good project and a finished project that me and the client is happy with. So in this situation, it would be the taxpayers. So we should be transparent with what we're going to do from the county level and from both from the road construction to the budget, transparency, so that everybody's on the same page.
So, healthcare management, oversight, regulatory compliance, construction management, large scale projects, budgeting. Out of that experience, if you are elected, what is, whether it's a positive or a negative, what is an experience that you had in your past that you've learned from and has helped prepare you for the challenges and rigors of an elected commissioner?
Well, it's basically a perspective of what can I do. There's a certain understanding on when something's been neglected for some time, or when you've heard a certain position being portrayed on someone, such as, well, we can't do this. I've heard a lot from my constituents. Well, we don't have a whole lot of money. We can't fix every road in the county. We don't, this money only goes so far. And so, that's a perspective that I don't bring to the table. What I do is I build some houses, also some single family residents, and I've dealt with this similar mentality where, home prices are up, and the income is somewhat stagnant sometimes, and so people come to a understanding, well, this is just how it is, and that is one of the most disheartening ideas that's out there in culture. It's not what is, your road being not to the standard you would like for it to be. That's just how it is. That shouldn't be a perspective. And so in those situations, I've been able to I said, well, what can we do? Let's start with that. Let's not go from, well, we can't do this. I said, well, let's look at what we can do, and let's start to maximize that and use every asset and technology and tool to maximize your efficiency. And through that process, I've been able to make a lot of what would seem to be impossible projects come true for first-time homeowners, first-time home buyers, to get into a home and a mortgage that they can afford and provide them something they're proud of. And so for me, I think to bring that mentality of, well, if you're unhappy with something, I'm not here to say, well, we don't have very much money or the budget doesn't allow for that. I bring a different perspective of, well, let's see exactly how we can address that and get creative with solutions. So it's a perspective of what can we do that we brought to bring to the table.
In the military, you continually have leader turnover by design. So you leaders don't get too comfortable with their subordinates and stuff, but you get the leaders that say, well, this is how we've always done it. This is how it's always been. Sign of poor leadership. It's one of the biggest things. We need problem solvers, not people that have excuses. So I think that's a great lesson. We're going to get in now a little bit about the specifics role a commissioner plays in a county. Got a couple hundred, well over 200 counties in Texas, and they all have commissioners' courts. And one of the biggest things that a commissioner is asked to do, regardless of the shape of the roads, regardless of, every county's in kind of a different spot. But the one thing that everyone has to do on an annual basis is they have to approve a budget. Talk to us a little bit about what you know about the budget process, how that budget process works, and then we'll get into specifically about your prioritization here in a minute. But talk to us a little bit about the overall budget process and what you know about that and what you can explain to us about that.
So, whether you're in a government role or you're in the private sector, a budget is a budget. And what that means for me is the definition of a fiscal conservative budget says it's irrelevant how much money I can have or can get or how much maximum profit there is. It's how much is this going to cost, right? You have to have an at cost position. So that mentality of creating a budget that facilitates the needs regardless of the taxable entities that you're going to be bringing in. So you have to rely on your department heads to provide you with fiscally conservative budgets. And so I think that's a mentality that you have to bring into a conservatism and create relations with these departments to find out what exactly they need. And then, as you see, in Washington, we've started to try and reduce some of those unnecessary spending. Also, transparency of future project, I think, is key to opening the line of communication to the taxpayers. You have to remember this is the taxpayers' money. So when you're using that taxpayer money to fund projects, perhaps you need to ensure that that is the desire of the taxpayer instead of perhaps using some of these to some projects that you feel may be necessary, but does that reflect the actual tax base? And so opening up the decision making to the taxpayers and letting them be involved in some of these decisions, right? So, before you go to remodel the courthouse, maybe, we have some other aspects that would be more direct applied to taxpayers.
And one thing, everybody correlates commissioners with roads, and we're going to get into roads here in a minute. That's a hot topic in any county, I think, across Texas. But there's other aspects of the things that you're going to be asked to budget. how and what would go into the prioritization process? As a commissioner, you're going to have different departments from the county that are going to come to you with basically, what they feel is their needs and wishes for a budget, and then you're going to have to make some tough decisions on what you end up ultimately approving and supporting in all of these different departments' budgets. How would you prioritize, and what would you prioritize in that budget making process?
Well, safety is paramount in government and oversight. So you have to prioritize that. So your police, your fire, your even your jails, those are all essential parts of the community, and so you have to really prioritize those ahead of the extra things that are not necessarily as pertinent to public safety. So you've got to support your police. We've got adequate salaries and equipment. Something I think that we can do better on is some of the grant programs that are available. We haven't been pushing really into grant programs, and they have a lot of the support from the state that can grant better products, for that can support your fire and your police that we need to be pushing for. And so, not only what can we do from our budgets positions, but what other support can we get from the state to equip them more efficiently? So we haven't. I don't think we've been doing that as well as we should. So trying to get grant writers on board to try to push some of those agendas and get some of that support is something that is part of the budget system that we need to push in for, but we've got to prioritize that. Outside of that, we've got to be conservative again. I can't say it enough. You got to build your budget for what it costs for you to do your work, not for how much can I get from the taxpayers. And so beyond the essentials, you have your road and bridge and several other, but I can't stress enough the conservative mindset that we have to start bringing. If we're going to start to eliminate property tax, or if we're going to try to move into a decrease of government, we have to be able to reduce the taxes at some point. And so that's something we have to try to push into in a really fiscal conservative manner.
Um, One of the biggest things that you're going to, be asked to do, and probably the most visible one that a commissioner is held accountable to, is the condition of the roads.
Mhm.
The bottom line is, everybody, sees the roads every day. It's what's front and center in a county, cities too, to take this hit. Um, it's the biggest complaint probably in any county across the board. It's because you can always correlate that to a specific elected official. Talk to us a little bit about, as you've been out on the campaign trail, as you've been meeting with, potential future constituents, your neighbors, precinct 4, et cetera. What is the current condition of the roads? What are you seeing with the roads? And we'll get into, some potential roles the commissioners plays here in a minute, but what's your assessment of the roads, and what's been done right, what's been done wrong, et cetera?
So, roads are a big problem. That's what ultimately led me to trying to see what could be done as far as repairing these and projecting some repair and finding out what are we doing as far as roads. I think there's three main, topics that the constituents of Precinct 4 and maybe in the county in general are dealing with. And one is the condition of the roads. They've been degraded, that we're losing shoulders, so they're getting more narrow all the time. Um, and then just the efficiency of repair doesn't seem to be really being attributed very well. So, efficiency is down, which means that, taxpayer dollars aren't being used adequately or stretched as far as they can. So, the narrowing of the road is a public safety challenge. I know specifically several uh, incidences where there was actually motor vehicle accidents due to the inability to fit. Motorcycles are having trouble navigating these roads. Passing at night, there's been some issues there. I know we've had in Grandview specifically, they've had an uptick in some motor vehicle collisions on the county roads. So, I think some of that's attributed to the narrowness and the crowning. I've even seen some areas where we were patching the edge of the road at least 18 inches inside of where the original road started. So we've basically started to forfeit road on the edges to try to repair it. So not only are we behind on the maintenance schedule, but even the practices that we are to mitigate that aren't being done effectively. I will say that, debris and trash in the ditches also a problem. I've heard those complaints, and that's the easiest problem in the world to fix. We should, every truck that comes back to the county already ought to have a bag of trash in the back of it. I mean, that's just standard practice that we have start implementing. I know we used to do a lot of remediation in that, and I haven't seen that being practiced. And I've heard complaints after that, and also complaints have been made to the precinct with no real follow-ups. The third thing is, animals in the county. I mean, that's a challenging topic to deal with, but there's a plenty of people that have issues with that, that run in the roads, getting hit in the road, whether it's animals and stuff like that that are being attacked. I know that's a complex issue, but at the same time, we can't do something. It seems to be the position of the current leadership, and again, I bring that perspective of, well, we may not be able to solve the problem today, but let's see what we can do to move forward. Let's see if we can address these issues and start creating solutions, even if they are long term. Let's create a long-term solution so that you can hold me accountable to that. So, years down the road, if we haven't made progress, then we can hold somebody accountable, but we have to take a position first. So,
And I think another thing that's a big set of confusion is, every single road, in Precinct 4 is not the county's responsibility. Talk to us a little bit about what roads in the county are the county commissioner's responsibility, are the county's role to fix. We have, every county has multiple cities in it. You have state highways, you got FM roads, CR roads. Talk to us a little bit the difference about what actually falls under the purview of a county commissioner.
yeah, specifically, TxDOT does navigate some and repairs some of the roads that are, in our counties that sometimes we complain about. And there's some private roads out there as well that people drive on, and those are not under the maintenance of the county. So there is some kind of confusion out there at times on what we are responsible for at the county level. But specifically, county roads, a CR, if it's got a CR on it, that's generally your indication. Anything outside of that is specifically maybe either privatized maintenance or repair or TxDOT requirements. So, that's your kind of dividing line. I know there's maybe some crossover there, here and there on certain situations, but that's pretty much your standard. So I think transparency, like being available to answer those questions, and just being out there on the roads with constituents, with your county guys. I know there are some situations where cities and counties obviously have to meet. Okay, so there's a point where the city road stops and the county road maintenance begins, and it's kind of a funny thing where they'll stick a sign. Whoever's got the best side of the road will stick a sign in saying this is where county road
Your
maintenance
tax
stops,
dollars at work.
or this is where city maintenance stops. Who's ever winning that road battle, and so, man, we've got to start improving those relations. So we don't need to stick a sign. We just need to go the extra mile to try to help one another out, because ultimately we're here for the taxpayer. And so, I always kind of chuckle when I see those signs. I'm like, well, obviously may not be good communication here between city and county. So ultimately, when you have that divide, you're going to create a greater wear pattern right there at that division. And so, you've got to kind of work together with TxDOT, with the city, whoever else is maintenance on some roads, and finding out what their schedule of repair is, and try to facilitate that so that your repair is as quality as it can be, and it can last as long as it can. So there's definitely some correlation there that you need to have relations so that repair schedules match up.
So, the bottom line is no one's going to be calling TxDOT to complain on roads. No one's going to
Amen.
be, so the county commissioner is going to take a lot of heat for roads that aren't in their purview. Is there anything that a county commissioner can do, should be doing, anything that you would do to try to affect some of the roads that you might not have a budget to fix? But is there anything that you would do or bring to the table in regards to trying to help some of the roads that fall under the budgeting priorities of like TxDOT, et cetera, to help?
Absolutely. I think that, your prioritization comes into play and what your commissioner is prioritizing. So if that's road, then his relations with TxDOT will reflect that. So, you look at Joshua's overpass project where that was pushed out for 10 years, I think, and we've been able to, the city of Joshua support, way to go, guys, for moving that up and being persistent with TxDOT, finding out how they can facilitate improvements. We've got we did pass the bond here recently for research and development on some projects, TxDOT projects. So I think we're trying to do that. We're trying to move in that direction currently, and so that's something we've just got to keep on supporting. But again, if that's not your priority, then where your relationships will be or where your priority will be. So if you're prioritizing roads, which is what if you've seen my campaign, that's my focus and priority, then those relations with TxDOT, with the city, and the research and developments bond packages that have passed are where I will spend the majority of my time trying to facilitate so that the infrastructure for our rural residents can be contributed to some of these TxDOT projects to be bringing in sooner and to address some of these issues.
So now we're going to get into a little topic that's a little more emotional here, and we're gonna dive into something that's been a big topic here in Johnson County, and it's PFAS, PFOS, and biosolids. This has been an issue that's been going on for a couple years in Johnson County, and I'm going to give a little bit of a timeline here. So in 2022, 2023, a product called granulite was applied by a company called Synagro on a farm in Grandview. There was some complaints by the farmer, by some neighboring farms about this. Here, environmental advocacy company was contacted with Johnson County environmental crime sections to do some testing to see if there was some potential dangers and contamination as a result of this land applied biosolids. It ultimately led to some very scary numbers on a specific farm, which ultimately led to the county environmental crimes section investigator giving a very public meeting on the dangers of biosolids. Ultimately led to a couple lawsuits. One, I believe, is still pending. One is up in the air still, and has taken a lot of time of our commissioner's court, a lot of time out of precinct 4, trying to raise awareness of PFAS. And before we go down this road here, I want to make a disclaimer that when PFAS was first broken in Johnson County, I spent an exorbitant amount of time interviewing individuals with Johnson County about this. I spent time in Austin advocating for House Bill 1674, walking the halls of Austin, pushing that legislation, and have been intimately involved with raising awareness about PFAS. Kind of to wrap this all up, and where we're at now and where this conversation's about to go is an area where some of this product was applied has been blamed for contamination on a neighboring farm. In October 2025, just a couple months ago, a competing study was released that puts very, very much so into question whether or not the land applied biosolids caused the contamination on this farm that was tested. So why are we talking about this now? Very simply, because the environmental crime section has been very definitive about what caused this. This has elicited a lot of emotion and a lot of accusations, and has inadvertently, unintentionally pitted neighbor against neighbor in rural communities. You're more familiar than the average individual on this. And recently, at an event where you and your opponent were both being asked questions, you had very differing kind of lanes on this and where this stands. Nobody is questioning, and I'll give you a minute to give your little disclaimer here if you feel it's important, but nobody's claiming that the farm that was tested by the environmental crime section does not have PFAS on it and in dangerous levels. The question is what caused this? So get us up to speed with your race as running for precinct or for county commissioner, and what you know about PFAS, where you stand on PFAS and biosolids, and how you're approaching this and what you're hearing in precinct 4.
Okay, so it's a very diverse and dimensional problem that first I think that let me say that the jurisdiction of the county commissioner is not in a scientific lane of expertise, and so either now or in the future is the responsibility of the commissioner to take on a scientific role. However, we do want to advocate for the voices to be heard in the places that make a difference, and so chain of command becomes very important when you are addressing some of these issues, to follow the chain of command, which is in the best interest of those that may or may not be affected by a situation. Okay. Um, when this study was released, it was released at the WHEAT conference. So it was a significantly publicly um, opened event, and so I was waiting on the county to disclose some of the information about the updated findings, because they were very forward with the first set of findings and allowing that to be presented. And so I kept waiting for the all information that had been done to be made public. And so over time, it just never started. It never was made its way out into the public domain. And so that was where I started to get a challenge, because I was talking to people in precinct 4, and I was getting this question a lot, and I said, well, the causation is getting challenged by another study. There was a study done on the farm where the actual biosolids was applied. So the farm in question never had biosolids applied to it. It was done. Go ahead. There was never, there was the farm that's in question that has the PFAS contamination never had the biosolid product applied to the farm directly. The causation was solicited that it came from an adjacent farm that had the product stored for momentarily and then applied. And so when the test came back and it was made public from the test that was done on the farm where the biosolids were actually applied, it did not test for elevated rates of PFAS that would indicate significant harm to animal or environment. And so that was a challenging thing for me. It doesn't indicate that that's at least not definitively the causation. Okay, you have to kind of look at that as potentially not the causation of the contamination.
And not to cut you off here, but this is the question at hand. The certain individuals within the county have been very definitive about exactly what caused this. By making statements like everything else has been ruled out. And as you stated before, the farm where this stuff was applied was never tested to the levels of the farm that had the contamination. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, right. It's been a little bit vague on the testing protocols that were used on the peers group study, but I know that the 1633A EPA standard testing facilities that require or that are recommended currently were done on the farm that was deemed the causation. So a very extensive study with a significant amount of samples were taken and done by a reputable remediation company actually indicated that those levels were not high. And beyond that, forever chemicals have a signature on them, from what I understand, that identify them as a specific category or specific strain, if you will, of forever chemical. And so there was also a challenge there where there were certain signatures that were found that didn't correlate with the signatures found on the other farms.
Sort of like a fingerprint,
Right.
or a blood type. It should, if I touch the same thing with my same thumb, the fingerprint will carry over. If my blood drops on one farm and then goes to another, the blood type will match. Am I breaking this down in as accurate a way as possible comparatively?
Yes, that's my understanding. And so, abroad, we've had some issues in the country. PFAS is an issue, and it is affecting families and farms in a variety of ways. The majority of it comes from industrial waste, significantly way into where these problems happen. So, we've had a major exposure in Maine, but the majority of that contributor was a paper mill factory, from what I understand. The latest was a carpet factory that was, industrial waste was being discharged. And so we don't have as much industrial waste, so the majority of our contamination of PFAS, even in biosolid, is residential use. And so the causation of this does seem to be in question. And when there's even studies done in Antarctica where they've tested where human life doesn't even exist, there's some levels of PFAS being found in those regions. And so it's very challenging. It comes in the rain. It comes in, not just runoff from a farm, but from the streets. It's in tires, right? So there's a significant challenge with the causation to be super definitive about that especially without the direct application of something.
And so just to remind everybody what happened, peer tested soil, pond water, well water, fish, and cattle in a large number of areas on a piece of property. They never tested the actual property that they accused of applying these biosolids. They did test the bar ditch, the area along the road, and got as close as they could. The study that was released in October 2025, it was done by a company called Parsons, which is a remediation company. This is a company that you would call to investigate the level of contamination, identify it, and then develop a plan to clean it up. That's who was hired. And then they contracted with Purdue University to actually do the testing. And what they tested, just so everybody knows, they tested groundwater samples all over, well, stock pond. They did core samples. They dug down multiple feet into the ground, tested core and all of that. Tested pretty much everything they could. They tested their own cattle, I believe. Tested their own fish. I don't know if they tested their own cattle. I don't think they have cattle there, but they own their own fish. Did a very thorough test. In full transparency, Peer tested a much broader swath of PFAS. Parsons and Purdue tested exactly specifically what TCEQ is responsible for testing and what the EPA is in regards to clean water. So what I'm going to read now is, and this was on April 29th, 2025. So April 29th, 2025, after the definitive causation was established, after the declaration of disaster, the county received a letter from Sabine Lang, a doctor, the chief toxicologist, risk assessment and research division from Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. And it basically, the data was given to TCEQ and says, evaluate the data. This is the peer study data. This is the victims' farms on Grandview, not where it was applied. This is where the peer study was, where they tested. They gave them all of the data. On March 7th, you provided TCEQ with the analytical lab reports and other supplemental documentation associated with the samples reported on the February 21st, 2024 peer report. TCEQ's evaluation of the PFAS concentrations from the analytical report, the peer report, sample results found that the 16 PFAS chemicals were either not detected or had concentrations that are below the applicable PCLs or drinking water standards. Based on these comparisons, the measured concentrations of these PFAS chemicals do not present levels that would harm human health or the environment. Now, what I just said is going to elicit a lot of emotion in the county. TCEQ can only regulate what they have to regulate. EPA can only dictate what is clean water based on what they currently are allowed to determine as clean water. And that's what we're all responsible for. If we want to make an argument that TCEQ has needs some additional tools to further test, that's a different discussion. We're talking about the definitiveness in individuals in the county assigning a definitive cause. Nobody's saying PFAS is good. How do you feel about this? What is your plan looking forward here? And we only have a few minutes left before we have to wrap this up. But talk to us a little bit about how you feel about this, where you want to take Precinct 4, and what you think needs to be done, and whether or not PFAS and biosolids is a concern to the residents of Johnson County.
So let me be clear and make this statement that I support banning biosolid applications for biosolids that test positive for high levels of PFAS. And all the farmers in Johnson County and abroad support that decision to prevent their farmlands from being contaminated. What the issue is the causation. I think from the beginning there was a causation established and not a lot of research done to fully investigate the potential for any other causation. These forever chemicals in their name have been around for 60 years, 50, 60 years. And so if they were ever entered into an environment, they will still be there regardless of if that was 50 years ago or that was yesterday. They're still going to be there. So when you get into the complexity of that, it's challenging to establish definitive causation. And I think we may have got emotional with the situation and potentially issued a causation that may or may not have been identifiable at the time for sure. And then after we look at some studies that have done previously to that, it definitely puts that into question. And with TCEQ's response letter, that's a challenge, for those that are affected and are being affected by the PFAS. And so, moving forward, if the PFAS plan, you can't ban biosolids and defeat a PFAS problem. It doesn't do anything but redirect the biosolids into landfills, which still can contaminate our rivers, our streams, and the future of our planet for our children. So it doesn't do anything to negate remediation or practice. So that's not really a solution-driven idea. What we need to do is advocate our legislators and our to approach EPA to approach TCEQ to expand their testing so that in the event that there is a problem with elevated levels, they will qualify for remediation. So we should really be pushing our voices at TCEQ so that we go through the proper chain of commands. The county doesn't have any budget or resources to respond to the event that there is an exposure. The state is going to rely on TCEQ to operate or to use any remediation practices. They're going to be the ones that do that. So, the county didn't really, as you can tell by the dates on that, we didn't go to TCEQ initially, and we haven't been really proactive from what I've gathered in regards to trying to reform some of the TCEQ policies, which is what's the best interest of our future residents. And so, the plan is to we have to look at a PFAS problem as a PFAS problem, not a PFAS problem and attach it directly to biosolids. Now, again, like I said, we definitely support banning biosolids if they pose a threat to the farmland or any other agricultural uses. But that's still not the complexity of it. We have to focus PFAS on all causations for PFAS and remediate that so we protect our planet, we protect our children, and we protect the future of Johnson County.
And here again, it's really easy to put blinders on and get laser-like focused. And if you don't differentially diagnose and you don't differentially look at this, I used to be a law enforcement officer, and the objectivity needed, the emotionless approach to investigations is very, very important. Law enforcement is not the adjudicator of stuff. They're not the deciding entity. They collect the information they need to do, and they should be very cautious about jumping to conclusions, especially when they're in a specialty lane. And here again, as you stated before, this is a lot bigger than just a biosolid on one farm issue. There's multiple MUDs, and we don't have a lot of time to go into MUDs today. We have to get ready to wrap this show up, but I hope to have you back on to talk more about MUDs. But there's well over 10, 15, some say up to 17 MUDs coming to Johnson County. These all discharge water into our community, and they all create biosolids that are going to have to be addressed. If we're too focused on one issue, we really need to be careful about doing that. Before Jake gets ready to close here, as we have to wrap up this show, I want to apologize to any farmer, any rancher, anybody out there that any of my past actions of jumping to a conclusion regarding this, if I caused you any harm or any stress in your life, I apologize. That was wrong of me. I should have left my emotion at the door in regards to this. And I look forward to watching the county move forward in a more objective, less emotionally driven, and open up the way that they approach this. And I apologize to you very directly if my past practices have harmed you in any way. Jake, we really don't have a lot of time to go into MUDs here. I think that we need to talk more about this soon. But as you're asking people to trust you, you just gave them a big difference between you and your opponent. What's the clearest promise that Precinct 4 residents, Johnson County residents can hold you accountable to? And what's the strongest reason for those that may be on the fence to consider voting for Jake Petty for County Commissioner Precinct 4?
Well, that's a pretty, I think there's 4 questions in that question, but we'll try to do our best. So, approaching the chain of command and ensuring that we can access resources, that we can get to our residents in the event of an issue is something we have to try and move towards, right? If you have a problem with the framework that's in place, then address that. You have to go through chain of command if you're going to get remediation practice. Opening up PFAS, and it's again, wastewater discharge of municipalities is another contamination source that I haven't been seen addressed at all. It's been all biosolids, and those are going directly into our rivers and our streams and our waters, and potentially causing greater application of PFAS into our system. Biosolids are only applied in a certain time frame at a certain scheduled event with a certain amount per acre. It's a very controlled environment, but we're discharging wastewater every day out of these municipalities. And when we bring these municipal utility developments in, or these home developments in, they're going to be doing the same thing. They're also going to be creating biosolids. So, there's multiple causations of PFAS that we have to start to look at and start to mitigate now, and make sure if we do need to change laws, if we do need to put in legislation and regulation, they can't just be in biosolids. It's got to be in wastewater discharge. We've got to start using some technology and really pushing in those areas, so we protect all of Johnson County from PFAS and not just isolated. So I think we got to really emotional about the situation, and my heart goes out for anybody that's affected by these PFAS chemicals, and I try to plan to work as hard as I can to find remediation practices if they come. Now, why do you vote for me is because that's a perspective that I bring. There's a variety of technology that's coming into all aspects, and that means roads specifically. For me, I've been looking into a lot of technology to be more effective with the resources we have, to be more efficient. There's some additives that create long-term repairs that last longer, are more effective. There's scan tools that can give us transparency. Again, I know it's important for us to create a culture that we start to tell the taxpayers what we're going to do and when we're going to do it. Without doing that, we can't be held accountable as a elected official. So I hope to bring an accountability that means I'm transparent. I will fix your road here. This is where it ranks. This is how much road I'm going to repair per year with the budget I have. If we have an issue with that, let's approach these issues. And so to bring that ability to hold our elected officials accountable is why I hope to get that influence into the commissioner's court. So that way, in 4 years from now, when we're doing this again, I can say, well, I was held to the accountable standard that I put forward to the taxpayers. That's the kind of mentality I hope to bring. And without that transparency, we can't have accountability. And that's what we really need to bring, is a fresh perspective to use technology in our implementations for both PFAS, forward thinking, roads, budgetaries, analysis, the entire spectrum. We can grow and become more efficient and be more transparent. So that's what I hope to bring, a fresh perspective of innovation and technology and effective practice to the Commissioner's Court, and to more especially the Road and Bridge Precinct.
Well, Jake, this is your chance to give them your last minute elevator speech.
Right.
Explain to them exactly why they should vote for you. Look right in the voters' eyes. Tell them who you are, what you stand for, and what you're bringing to the table for Johnson County Commissioners Precinct 4.
Well, as you know, I've said, we've talked about several things, and there's obviously more to speak to in each of these areas. But ultimately, what I can provide for you is a full-time commissioner, somebody that's there leading the road crew, that's available in the office to oversee the budgets, the projects, and the people of Johnson County. That presence it allows me to be in touch with you, to hear your voices, and to follow up. Even if I'm the one that has to get out of the truck and pick up the trash in the ditch, the trash will be picked up. And moving forward, transparency on what we can do, just to shift that mentality into, I don't want to hear what we can't. I want to provide solutions for what we can do to move forward. So accountability, presence, and transparency. I know those are kind of buzzwords with some of our current, political parties and what they're trying to do, but hold us accountable for that. Have we done that? I've heard that from many campaigns throughout this process, but I'd like to ask you, are we transparent right now? Are we accountable right now? Can we be held accountable with the transparency we provided to the taxpayers? And if you can't answer that, then it's time for a change, and that's what I represent.
Well, Jake, we want to tell everybody what your Facebook is. That's Jake Petty for County Commissioner. That's Jake Petty for County Commissioner. They can go there to get in touch with you, learn more about your campaign. We're about, by the time this video comes out, we'll be less than a week away from early voting beginning. March 3rd, late at night, we'll know if you're elected the next commissioner, or if we're going to continue with the current incumbent. I wish you the best of luck. Thank you very much. I think that we need to have you back on to walk through this a little bit more and talk MUDs, and we really appreciate your time, Jake. Thanks, and thanks for taking the hard position on something that's so emotional and being willing to address it. Thank you very much, Jake.
Thank you.